The Zephyrian capital was a city built to intimidate the sky itself. Impossibly tall crystalline spires rising into violet haze, each structure humming with a resonance that unsettled Marcus Webb's very human bones. He tried not to gape as he followed the royal attendant through the main hall, but the architecture made it difficult. Light didn't behave normally here. It curved, it folded, it whispered. He was still wondering whether any of this was safe for human physiology when the obsidian throne chamber opened before him. The room was vast, cathedral-like, but sharper, every surface carved from dark crystal that refracted the faintest movement into 1,000 shifting reflections. Floating glyphs drifted through the air like luminous dust motes. And at the far end, raised upon a platform shaped like a shard of fallen night, sat Queen Astrea of Zephyr. Marcus had seen her on diplomatic broadcasts, but nothing had prepared him for the real thing. Zephyrian beauty hit like gravity, subtle, quiet, then suddenly overwhelming. Astrea's skin wasn't merely luminous. It held depths, as though galaxies were suspended beneath its surface. Her ears tapered elegantly, her eyes shifting in opalescent gradients that tracked every ripple of emotion. She was regal, composed, and stunning in a way that made Marcus acutely aware of the wrinkles in his uniform. He caught himself staring and forced a professional smile. His translator pulsed at his jawline. "Don't mess this up, Webb." "Marcus Webb of Earth," she announced, her voice layered with harmonics that vibrated through the floor. "Step forward for the ceremony of titles." He did, or tried to. His boots made a sound like he'd stepped onto polished ice, and for a split second he thought he might fall and cause the first human, Zephyrian war. Astrea's lips curved ever so slightly. Great, she saw that. 36 nobles formed a sweeping semicircle around the throne. Their robes shimmered like living nebulae, their gazes were sharp enough to cut. Marcus could practically hear their thoughts, primitive human, simple biology, soft bones, probably still eats food that isn't vaporized. Astrea lifted a hand. Holographic sigils appeared in the air, 3 traditional titles for diplomatic liaisons. Honored friend of the crown, distinguished speaker between worlds, bearer of accorded messages. They spun slowly, waiting to be chosen. Marcus straightened. His briefing said this was simple. Choose one, say the ceremonial line, bow, leave without humiliating Earth. Easy. Your Majesty, he said with his best diplomat smile, I'm honored. These titles are very dignified. A ripple of amusement passed through the nobles. Not good, Astrea tilted her head. If none feel appropriate, humans may offer their own interpretation, provided it reflects mutual dignity. His translator hummed. Marcus's brain, ever unhelpful under pressure, said, say something confident, something memorable, show them humans aren't stiff bureaucrats, and then he made the single worst decision of his professional life. He grinned. Well then, he said lightly, how about your husband? The silence was instant and catastrophic. The crystalline walls vibrated in dissonant confusion. 20 nobles inhaled sharply in perfect synchrony. Somewhere, a scribe dropped their hollow slate and whispered something that Marcus sincerely hoped wasn't an omen. Astrea froze, not just physically, her entire aura shifted, colors tightening into stunned silver. Her eyes widened in a way that was not regal, not composed, but unmistakably human in its shock. My what? She breathed. Marcus swallowed. It was a joke, human humor, you know, funny, ha. The nobles stared at him the way people stare at malfunctioning machinery. Should we run? Or wait for it to explode? Astrea blinked once, twice, then summoned a floating crystalline tablet with a flick of her fingers. Text scrolled rapidly. Her skin flushed with shimmering rose, Zephyrian embarrassment. Marcus Webb of Terra, she said slowly, you have invoked the ancient consort title of binding partnership. I did what? The chamber brightened, reacting to emotional tension. Several nobles began whispering furiously. By our oldest laws, Astrea continued, voice tightening, your declaration is legally recognized as a formal proposal to the crown. Marcus's mouth went dry. I was kidding. The law, she said, does not recognize humor. Oh no, oh no. He opened his mouth to retract it, then stopped when Astrea stepped closer. And if you do not withdraw your proposal, she said quietly, you become my consort-elect bound to the throne of Zephyr. Marcus stared at her, at the queen who radiated command and impossible beauty, waiting for his answer with a calm mask that didn't fully hide the flicker of something beneath. Fear, hope, curiosity. What if I do withdraw it? He asked. Astrea's gaze lowered a fraction. Then you will have publicly rejected the monarch of Zephyr before the assembled court, an act diplomatically permissible, politically disastrous. Of course, because this day wasn't stressful enough. Marcus exhaled slowly. Your Majesty, before I respond, can I ask one thing? Yes, she said, voice barely above a whisper. What did you think before all this about me? As a delegate, I mean. Her eyes softened, shifting into luminous blue. That you were sincere, she murmured, and unexpectedly kind, and that your presence in negotiation chambers made them quieter. A faint blush shimmered beneath her skin. But none of this was supposed to happen. Marcus spent the next hour in a private consultation chamber that clearly wasn't designed with human anxiety in mind. The walls shifted colors based on his heartbeat. The floor hummed when he paced. And every reflective surface helpfully displayed status readings of his stress levels as if to remind him, you are currently having the worst day of your career. He dragged both hands through his hair. Great. Fantastic. I'm going to start an interstellar war because I can't shut up during awkward silences. The chamber lights pulsed sympathetically. Outside, Zephyrian nobles argued in spirals of shimmering holographic glyphs. The sound filled the air like distant thunder. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. A room full of powerful people trying to decide whether he was a diplomatic marvel or an idiot with good cheekbones. Probably the second. The door glided open. Astria entered quietly without her entourage. Her presence changed the light in the room, subtle but instant. The crystalline walls calmed, colors softening. Even Marcus's stress-monitoring reflections dimmed as if the palace itself respected her emotional gravity. You asked for time to think, she said softly. Have you reached a decision? Marcus stared at her. This close, the details were overwhelming. Her eyes were not one color, never one color. They shifted like nebulae under starlight. Her bioluminescent markings glowed faintly at her temples, pulsing with breath she wasn't quite controlling. She was composed, dignified, and nervous. An alien queen, nervous because of him, he swallowed. Before I decide, can I ask what this means for you? Personally, not politically. Her expression flickered, as if he'd surprised her. For me, she said slowly, a consort is not a ceremonial ornament. It is a partner, someone I trust with my days, my decisions, my solitude. Her eyes lowered briefly. It means letting someone close enough to see the parts of me the crown does not permit. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. And politically, he asked. Politically, Astria exhaled, it means every faction in the empire will question my judgment. It means scrutiny, debate, challenges to authority, a fragile pause, but none of that frightens me as much as the idea of choosing someone who does not truly wish to stand with me. He blinked. Wait, are you saying you'd be disappointed if I walked away? Astria's luminous markings brightened in a soft cascade, Zephyrian for truth slipping out before it's polished. I am saying, she murmured, that in 3 days you have shown me more sincerity than most of my court has managed in a decade. He looked away, heart pounding harder than any diplomatic disaster deserved. I didn't mean to propose, he said. It was a panic joke. Humans do that. I understand, she replied, but the law does not, and neither do the nobles. What matters now is not what you meant, only what you choose. Marcus walked to the center of the room, pacing. His thoughts tangled, if he stayed. He'd be bonded to her, a queen, a stranger. A woman who seemed impossibly ancient and impossibly young all at once. If he withdrew, he'd shame Earth, sabotage relations, humiliate her publicly, and possibly destabilize her rule. Neither was simple, neither was safe. He turned back to her. If I accepted, he said quietly, would you treat me like a prop, like a political accessory? Her answer was immediate, no. The word rang through the room like a crystalline bell. Her expression softened. If I accepted you, it would be because I see something in you worth choosing. He felt heat rush to his face. You barely know me. I know enough, she said. You are honest, you question what you do not understand. And you have made me laugh, without calculation. Do you know how rare that is here? He didn't, but he felt the sincerity in her voice like a gravitational pull. Astria hesitated, then stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough that her opalescent skin caught the chamber light, glowing softly. Zephyrians didn't invade personal space lightly. This was intentional. Marcus, she whispered, I cannot ask you to bind your future to mine. But I can tell you this, you are not someone I wish to reject. The air thinned, his thoughts spiraled, his heart thudded in his chest like it was auditioning to escape. He finally found his voice. I need one thing, he said. Her brows lifted. Name it. I want to understand what I'm agreeing to. not the legalities. You. Why would a queen who could choose anyone not dismiss a human who made a stupid joke? Silence, then Astria breathed out slowly. Because, she said, voice trembling at the edges, I have been surrounded by admirers since the day I took the throne, but not by equals, not by someone who speaks to me without fear, not by someone who looks at me and sees more than a crown. She met his gaze fully unmasked, unguarded. When you joked, she murmured, I did not see insult, I saw possibility. His pulse stumbled. She stepped back just enough to let him breathe. You may withdraw Marcus Webb, she said softly, but know that your words mattered to me. He closed his eyes, and in that moment he knew his answer. The palace announced his new status before he had even finished exhaling. A soft chime echoed through the crystalline halls, too gentle to be an alarm, too resonant to be ceremonial, and suddenly every corridor shimmered with golden glyphs that spiraled outward like blooming flowers. The announcement translated itself into his earpiece. Consort-elect confirmed. All protocols restructured. Meaning, congratulations, human, your life is no longer your own. Marcus stood there, stunned, as Zephyrian attendants materialized from seemingly nowhere. They didn't bow, Zephyrians didn't bow, but their markings brightened in formal acknowledgement. Consort-elect Webb, one said, your quarters have been reassigned to the royal wing. May we carry your belongings? He blinked. I don't actually have any belongings, I just got here yesterday. The attendants exchanged looks, not sure whether this was tragic or simply a human custom. Astria stepped beside him before he could say anything else. She didn't touch him, too intimate for this setting, but her presence shifted the energy of the room. The attendants straightened, their markings deepening into shades of respect. See that consort-elect Webb is given everything he requires, she said, including clothing appropriate for court sessions. That made Marcus grimace. Is that the thing where I have to wear outfits that look like I was dipped in iridescent paint? A faint smile tugged at her lips. Only for formal ceremonies. That doesn't make me feel better. It was not meant to, she said softly, and for a second, just a second, he was certain she was teasing him. The attendants led him through the palace while Astria remained behind to address the nobles. He heard their voices rising and falling like waves. He cannot be consort, he is human. Ancient law permits it. It threatens the succession. It strengthens the alliance. Their debate blurred into background noise as he entered the royal wing. He expected luxury. He did not expect this. The suite was enormous, larger than any Earth residence he had ever seen. The walls shimmered with slow-moving constellations. The floor shifted to accommodate his steps, softening where he walked. A window opened into a view of the capital that nearly stole his breath. Crystalline spires catching violet sunlight, the entire city glowing like a buried nebula. He sat down heavily. What am I doing? He whispered. The room responded by dimming its lights, a Zephyrian environmental AI reading his emotional levels with irritating accuracy. He rubbed his face. Consort-elect, partner to a queen. Responsible for diplomacy, perception, scandal, centuries-old tradition. And yet, when he'd looked at Astria, when she had admitted that his words mattered, that moment had felt more real than anything in the past 3 days. The door chimed softly. Astria entered. She wore no crown, no heavy ceremonial mantle, only a pale robe that caught the chamber light like frost catching dawn. Without the armor of royalty, she looked different. Not weaker, never that, but more human in the places her emotions reached the surface. She dismissed the attendants and stepped into the room, watching him carefully. Are you all right? She asked. No, he admitted, not even slightly. A flicker of concern crossed her features. Do you regret your decision? No, he exhaled. I'm terrified, but I don't regret it. Astria approached, slow and deliberate, stopping just within comfortable proximity. Terrified is natural, she murmured. I have spent years surrounded by those who fear me. It is strange to stand before someone who fears the circumstances more than the crown. I don't fear you, he said quietly. Her opalescent eyes softened. I know. For a moment neither spoke. The palace hummed around them, alive, listening, waiting. Finally, she said, there are matters we must discuss. Your role will place you within every major sphere of Zephyrian government. The nobles will resist. The council will test you, and my adversaries will watch. Marcus swallowed. Does this put you in danger? Only if I stand alone, she said, which, as of today, I no longer do. His pulse kicked. There it was again, that subtle shift, that unspoken acknowledgement that their relationship, accidental as it was, had already begun changing her world. She walked toward the balcony doors and opened them with a gesture. Cool violet air swept into the room, carrying the distant resonance of the city. "Walk with me." He followed her onto a wide terrace overlooking Zephyr's crystalline skyline. The stars were beginning to emerge, sharp, bright, unfiltered by atmosphere. Astria rested her hands on the railing, her markings pulsing slowly. "Marcus," she said, "I must tell you something before the court does." He braced himself. "When you accepted the title, you became eligible for integration into the Succession Council. Meaning if anything were to happen to me?" She hesitated, a rare crack in her composure. "Your decisions could shape the future of the Empire." Marcus felt the world tilt. "You're saying I'm part of your line of succession?" "Not directly," she said, "but adjacent, influential." Her voice lowered, "And that terrifies more nobles than you can imagine." He let out a shaky laugh. "I'm a middle-tier diplomat who once got reprimanded for mislabeling a cargo manifest. I'm not qualified to rule a space empire." "You are not expected to rule," she said, "only to stand beside me." She turned to him fully, the city lights reflected in her eyes like distant galaxies. "You should know," she added gently, "I would not have accepted your proposal if I did not believe you could bear the weight of my world." His chest tightened again, different this time, not fear, something quieter, warmer. "And what about you?" he asked. "Are you bearing this alone?" Astria looked away for a long moment, long enough that he felt the distance between their species, their lives, their expectations. Then she said, barely audible, The council chamber was carved from pure resonance crystal, a material that responded to emotion, intention, and, unfortunately, fear. Which meant the moment Marcus stepped inside, the entire room shimmered in a faint, nervous blue. Great. Not intimidating at all. He straightened his borrowed ceremonial jacket, woven from threads that adjusted themselves in real time, which was both convenient and profoundly unsettling, and tried not to trip on the invisible steps that reconfigured under his feet. Astria entered behind him. Instant silence. Even the crystal seemed to pause in its vibrational hum. She wore her full regalia today, a mantle of spectral fabric that shifted like cosmic dust, a crown that hovered above her head rather than sitting on it, and markings along her collarbones that glowed brightly enough to illuminate half the room. This was not the Astria he'd spoken with on the balcony. This was the monarch who commanded a star-spanning empire. Her gaze found him. Something softened in her eyes for half a heartbeat, but then she stepped forward, all warmth hidden beneath cold authority. "Council," she said, her voice layered in a harmony that resonated through Marcus's ribs. "Let us begin." The semicircle of counselors stood. Their markings flared in sharp, unreadable patterns. Marcus recognized none of them, but every gaze held calculation. The tallest stepped forward, his voice low and metallic. "Your Majesty, we acknowledge the legitimacy of the ancient law invoked. But many of us question the suitability of this human for the consort-elect role." Marcus stiffened. Astria didn't. "State your concerns." The counselor gestured toward Marcus with one elegant, accusing hand. "He lacks our physiology, our neural structures, our political education. He cannot read emotional harmonics, navigate resonance law, or survive high-density atmospheres." His eyes narrowed. "He is fragile." Marcus bristled, but Astria merely tilted her head. "All consorts are fragile," she replied. "That is what makes them valuable. They remind the throne of what must be protected." The room murmured, unsure whether this was praise or a warning. Another counselor, a woman with crystalline hair, spoke next. "Does the human understand what being consort entails? Influence over resource allocations, joint responsibility for diplomatic failures, access to succession discussions, and the risk of assassination." Marcus blinked. "Wait, I'm sorry, risk of what?" Several counselors exchanged looks of smug satisfaction. Astria stepped forward sharply. "Any threat against the consort is a threat against me." The floor vibrated in warm gold, resonance crystal reacting to her emotion. The counselors visibly recoiled. Marcus, meanwhile, tried to process the fact that stabbed for political reasons was now apparently on his to-do list. The eldest counselor spoke, voice heavy as stone. "Human Marcus Webb, do you believe yourself prepared for this role?" Marcus inhaled slowly. A month ago, he'd been a mid-level diplomat whose biggest daily challenge was keeping Earth representatives from yelling at each other over mining tariffs. Now he was standing before an alien council, being judged for a job he never applied for. He should have said no, or apologized, or begged for reconsideration. But Astria's gaze reached him across the chamber, steady, quiet, waiting. He stepped forward. "I won't pretend I understand everything about your culture," he said. "I don't. I'm still learning how your lights work and your floors. And your emotional architecture." A few counselors frowned. One looked personally offended. "But I do understand what responsibility is. I've spent years helping people who hate each other find common ground. I've spent my life representing Earth in rooms where no one wanted to hear what humans had to say." He met their gazes one by one. "You say I'm fragile, maybe I am, but humans survive because we're stubborn. We adapt. We break rules when we need to, and we don't run from difficult things." Silence, not hostile, evaluating. Then slowly he added, "And I know I won't be doing any of this alone." He didn't look at Astria. He didn't have to. Her harmonic glow sharpened, dangerously close to pride. The crystalline floor shifted from anxious blue to steady violet. The counselors exchanged glances, their markings flickering in debate. Finally, the eldest counselor nodded once. "The human speaks truth. Fragile does not mean weak." Another counselor sighed. "We will require ongoing evaluation of his diplomatic usefulness." "Agreed. We will monitor his integration into succession protocols." "Of course." "And," said the tall, metallic-voiced counselor, smiling grimly, "he must undergo education in resonance law, Zephyrian etiquette, and harmonic interpretation." Marcus opened his mouth to protest. Astria stepped forward. "I will personally oversee his instruction." The room erupted in murmurs. Personal instruction from the Queen was unprecedented. Astria raised one hand. Silence fell again. "The human consort-elect will receive the same education I did as heir," she said. "If you doubt his potential, I will shape it myself." Marcus blinked. "I will shape it myself." He really hoped that didn't involve bioluminescent tattoos or whatever the Zephyrian equivalent of calculus was. The eldest counselor bowed his head. "So be it. The council acknowledges the human as consort-elect." Astria's shoulders relaxed just a fraction. The hearing ended with ceremonial gestures Marcus couldn't decode, but one thing was clear. He had survived his first political trial. Barely. When the counselors dispersed, Astria approached him, her expression unreadable until they reached the exit corridor where no one else followed. Then finally she exhaled. "You did well." He laughed weakly. "I thought I was going to throw up." "That," she said, "is normal." "Is assassination normal?" She hesitated. "Less than it used to be." "That does not help." A tiny smile touched her lips. "Come, there is something I wish to show you." She led him down a narrow hall that opened into a spiraling tower of shimmering glass. At the top was a circular balcony overlooking the entire Zephyrian capital. From here, the city looked alive, light flowing through it like blood through veins. Astria stood beside him, quiet for a long time. "When I ascended to the throne, Marcus expected the personal instruction Astria had promised to involve textbooks, translators, and maybe a few hours of painfully formal etiquette lessons. He did not expect to be led into a chamber that looked like a cross between a meditation shrine and a starship engine room. Glowing conduits, suspended crystal arrays, and a circular platform humming with a low, steady resonance that he could feel in the soles of his feet. "Astria," he whispered, "is this safe?" "That depends," she said. "On what?" "On how honest you are willing to be." "Oh, fantastic. A truth chamber." She stepped onto the circular platform, her mantle trailing behind her like spilled starlight. "This is the harmonic nexus," she explained, "where heirs are trained to perceive emotional resonance. You cannot rule Zephyr without understanding what your people feel, even when they do not speak it." "That sounds like telepathy." "It is not telepathy," she said. "It is listening." The crystals overhead brightened, swirling in slow spirals. Marcus stepped onto the platform beside her. The moment his foot touched it, the air thinned as though the room itself inhaled. Astria stood a little too close, not improperly close, but close enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her opalescent skin. "Close your eyes," she said softly. He did. A hum, deep and steady, rose through the floor. The hairs on his arms lifted. His heartbeat quickened. "Now," she whispered, "tell the Nexus how you feel." He hesitated. "Is that required?" "Yes, required, or Zephyrian required." "Required," she said with queenly finality. "Begin." He exhaled, tension knotting in his chest. "I feel overwhelmed." The crystal arrays shifted into a muddled swirl of colors. "I feel scared," he admitted, the colors sharpened, stabilizing. "And I feel," he stopped, swallowed. "Out of place." Astria's voice softened. It is expected. The Nexus recognizes confusion, but confusion is not weakness. He opened his mouth to answer, but she lifted one hand. Now, Astria said, the Nexus will attune to me. She closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire room lit up, brilliant, breathtaking, a symphony of luminous color cascading through the arrays above them. Gold, deep blue. A shimmering rose shade he'd only seen in her markings when she let herself be vulnerable. Marcus stared. Astria, what does that mean? She opened her eyes. It means I feel many things. Her voice trembled barely, but enough. More than the Nexus finds easy to categorize. What things? Silence, then softly. Responsibility. The light softened, fear. It darkened, and something else, she whispered. Something new. Marcus felt his pulse thrum in his throat. What new thing? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, letting the crystal light wash over both of them. She studied him, his face, his mouth, his eyes, as though evaluating emotional patterns humans could not see. Then she breathed out. When you spoke before the council, when you stood beside me despite your fear, the Nexus interpreted a new harmonic. Marcus swallowed, which was. Her markings brightened, warm and unsteady. Attachment. He forgot how to breathe. It does not mean what humans might assume, she hurried on. Zephyrian attachment is not possession nor desire. It is a shift in emotional gravity, a recognition, a pull toward another's presence. So you feel a pull toward me? She hesitated, then she nodded. Yes. The crystals flared gently in confirmation. Marcus's heart thundered. And is that bad? He asked quietly. Dangerous, she whispered, but not bad. She turned away from him then, stepping off the platform. The lights dimmed back to ambient glow. Come, she said, composed again. There is more you must learn. But Marcus did not move. He stood there, still caught in the hum of the Nexus, replaying her words over and over. Attachment. A pull toward another's presence. He forced his voice to steady. Astria, if this is dangerous for you, then why aren't you keeping your distance? She stopped, her back straightened. Slowly, agonizingly, she looked over her shoulder. Because, she said, I have spent too long being untouched by anything real. He almost stepped toward her. Almost, but she turned fully before he could. Your training will continue this evening, she said. But for now, there is something we must discuss. Her tone had shifted, no longer vulnerable. Now it was edged with tension. The Galactic Press has obtained the footage of your proposal. Marcus felt his stomach drop. What, how? The same way they always do, she said. Illegally. Her jaw tightened. And without context, it appears as though you proposed with full intention. He pressed a hand to his forehead. This keeps getting worse. There is more, she said. The footage is being interpreted as a romantic declaration. That's not great. It is catastrophic, Astria said, because a declaration of that nature implies that you sought me personally, not diplomatically, meaning certain factions believe you manipulated protocol to gain direct influence over the throne. I what? It does not matter what actually happened, she said grimly. It matters what they can convince the populace to believe. He exhaled shakily. So what do we do? Her gaze locked onto his, steady, intense. We answer them, she said, together. How? By giving them something undeniable. Like what? Her next words fell like a gravitational shift. A unified appearance before the entire empire. Marcus blinked. A public appearance, us, together. Yes. And what kind of appearance? She held his gaze for a dangerously long moment. The kind, she said quietly, that convinces the Empire you did not choose me by accident. His breath caught. Astria, what exactly does that mean? It means, she murmured, stepping closer, standing beside me, in front of millions, with the certainty of someone who meant every word of what he said. Silence tense, electric. Can you do that, Marcus? She asked softly. Marcus barely slept. How could he? Tomorrow he would stand before millions, maybe billions, beside a queen whose presence bent light, whose voice reshaped rooms, and whose existence made interstellar history feel small. He spent most of the night staring at the city through the crystalline windows of the royal wing, watching the spires pulse with quiet luminance. Each tower reflected Astria's empire. Beautiful, fragile, impossibly structured, and trembling under the weight of scandal. They think I manipulated her. The thought made his chest tighten. He hadn't manipulated anything. If anything, he was the one being swallowed whole by a system far beyond his understanding. But tomorrow, He would have to act as though he belonged here, as though he had chosen Astria deliberately, consciously, intentionally, as though his heart wasn't stumbling every time she said his name. As dawn neared, he finally pulled himself from the window and changed into the attire the attendants had left for him, a deep indigo formal coat threaded with silver resonance fibers that adjusted to his pulse. It made him look taller, steadier, almost regal. Almost. A soft chime, someone at the door. He expected attendance. He did not expect Astria. She entered alone, as she had the night he first agreed to become consort-elect. Morning light hit her mantle and scattered into 1,000 spectral fragments against the walls. She looked less like royalty and more like something carved from starlight. "Marcus," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't formal now. It wasn't queenly, it was something human. He stood straighter. "Is everything ready?" "Everything is unraveling," she admitted. He blinked. "That's not comforting." "It wasn't meant to be." She stepped forward until only a breath separated them. Her opalescent eyes studied him with unsettling precision, reading emotion without words. "You don't have to do this," she murmured. He froze. "What?" "If you stand beside me today," she said, "you will no longer be a temporary solution. You will no longer be the human caught in a protocol error." She inhaled. "You will become something the Empire watches, judges, fears." Fears, because a consort with no political lineage, who earns loyalty through sincerity alone, is the most dangerous kind. Marcus swallowed. "Do you fear that?" Her markings softened, rose, and gold. "No," she whispered, "not you." A long pause stretched between them, not tense, not awkward, just full. "Then let me stand with you," he said finally. "Not for politics, not for the Empire, for you." Something flickered in her expression, surprise, relief, warmth she tried to hide and failed to contain. "Very well," she said, voice steadier again. "Then we walk together." And they did. The crystal amphitheater was an ocean of light. Every seat was filled with Zephyrians whose skin markings glowed in shifting patterns. Cameras hovered in the air like drifting stars. Entire civilizations watched through interstellar networks. As Marcus stepped into view beside Astria, a wave of shimmering ripples flowed outward, emotional resonance, thousands of beings reacting at once. He almost faltered. She didn't. Astria held her head high, shoulders squared, expression carved from dignified calm. When she extended her hand, not touching his but offering proximity, he instinctively mirrored the gesture. The amphitheater brightened as if the crystals themselves approved. Astria spoke first. "Citizens of Zephyr," she began, her voice layered with harmonics that commanded silence. "3 days ago, a tradition older than our empire was invoked. A tradition meant to bind sincerity to power, intent to truth." Her gaze shifted to Marcus. His words, spoken in uncertainty, were interpreted by law as a proposal. Many have questioned his motives. Many have questioned mine. Marcus's chest tightened. Astria continued, her tone unwavering. "Today we answer you." She turned toward him, fully. The entire amphitheater held its breath. "Marcus, Web of Earth," she said, the sound softened by something unmistakably tender. "Did you choose me as your consort with intent?" He felt thousands of eyes on him. His pulse hammered in his throat. He remembered the harmonic nexus, her confession, the fragile truth behind her power, the loneliness she had carried alone for years. He stepped forward, one clear, steady movement, and for the first time since he arrived in this galaxy, he wasn't acting. "I choose you," he said quietly. "Not by accident, not by mistake, not because I'm required to." He inhaled. "I choose you because, when I stand beside you, I don't feel lost here." The resonance crystals vibrated with a sound like a held breath breaking free. Astria's markings brightened, too bright to disguise the emotion beneath. She lifted her chin, then let all gathered witness. The amphitheater erupted in shimmering light. But the moment wasn't over. Astria reached toward him, not touching, but offering something even more intimate in Zephyrian culture. A harmonic alignment gesture, a vow. "Marcus, Web of Earth," she said softly, "do you stand with me, not as a tool of governments, but as an equal, as a chosen partner?" His voice trembled, but not with fear. "Yes," he whispered. The harmonics between them aligned, visible, audible, emotional. The amphitheater exploded in brilliance. That was it. The answer the Empire needed. The proof no faction could twist or smear. Astria turned to her people. "This is my consort-elect," she declared. "Chosen with intent, bound not by accident but by truth." Marcus felt the shift, a realignment of perception. Acceptance, reluctant at first, but rising like dawn over the crystalline spires. When the ceremony ended, the applause wasn't loud. Zephyrians didn't have a word for applause, but the lights rising across the chamber, the harmonics converging, the city glowing through the amphitheater windows. It was approval, powerful, overwhelming, and as they left the platform, Astrea leaned closer, her voice barely above a breath. "You did well," she murmured. "I meant every word," he replied. She paused. "A dangerous admission," she whispered. He smiled wearily. "I'm getting used to danger." She stopped walking, turned to him, and in a moment the cameras had already turned away in a corner where no one else looked. Astrea allowed herself something she had denied for years. A small, fragile, deeply human smile. "Then," she said softly, "let us see what our future becomes." Marcus exhaled slowly, the enormity of everything settling around him like a cloak he hadn't expected to wear, but one that finally fit. He glanced at her. "At least this time," he said quietly, "my joke wasn't an accident." She blinked, meaning. He met her eyes. "I think I meant it the first time." For a long heartbeat, Astrea didn't move. Then her markings flared, warm, bright, radiant. And for the first time since he met her, she whispered his name not as a title, but as something else entirely. Marcus. The city hummed, the crystals glowed, the universe held its breath. And the story closed on a truth both of them already knew. This was no accident anymore.